Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about everything board game related. Today we're going to be talking to you guys about an upcoming preview for another Scott Alms game by Gamelyn Games. This one is called Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, and it's a 4X game, David.
Yes, it is indeed a 4X game. Not generally my cup of tea, but we've played this a couple times now.
Well, it's all about conflict, and I know you're not a big conflict gamer, right?
There is conflict in this game for sure.
So 4X games, for you guys that are unfamiliar with what that is, it became very popular in the PC market years ago with games like Masters of Orion and whatnot. In this one, you are one of 4 different fantasy factions, basically vying for power or land in this area.
Right.
And you can win in one of 4 different ways. One of them is by building your 3 towers onto the board, and that triggers the end-game condition. I don't want to say it wins, because it's not an outright win when you trigger one. It triggers the end-game. The next thing you can do is destroy another player's capital.
Right.
You can recruit all of your peons and your warriors. And then the last one is to discover all the exploration tokens on the board.
Yeah, once all of those tokens are gone, it can trigger the end too.
What's really unique about this game is the way the game sets up. Now, there's 6 continents on here. However, you're only going to use a specific number depending upon the number of players. In a 2-player game, you're going to use 3 of the continents.
Yeah, with a dummy continent, basically.
A dummy's place on the board. And then you're going to use the same number of continents for a 3 and a 4-player game.
Right.
So, to seed the board, you're basically going to let the player who is not first player to his right pick one location, and they're going to put their capital on the capital location on the board, and then in counterclockwise order, each player is going to follow suit. That kind of gives players the ability to tailor where they want to start, because each of the factions does better in specific areas on the board.
Yeah, exactly. And it should be noted, too, the continents are all the same in large respects. You know, the same number of territories, the same types of territories, so you can gather all the same resources. So there's no big advantages or disadvantages, but like Jeremy said, there are a few class-specific or race-specific advantages that you might want to consider when you're placing.
Speaking of locations on the board, there are 3 types of resources in each of these continents. There's mana, which is green, there's ore, which is red, and then there's food, which is yellow.
Right.
There's 2 other locations on there. One is a swamp, and then one of them is a desert. There's no real gameplay mechanisms built into them. It's just places that you can acquire resources, basically farm those lands to be able to do things. Plus, some of the exploration tokens only start on specific locations.
Yeah, and the exploration tokens are really interesting, too. Those go out at the very beginning of the game, and that really helps drive the expand and the exploration, because you can go out there and discover all sorts of good things, but also all sorts of bad things.
Yeah. What's really cool about this game, too, is that each of these factions is completely unique of one another. They all have these built-in tech trees that allow each of the players to recruit 3 unique heroes that are different for each of the players. Each of the heroes has unique abilities that actually level up when you build up your capital. So you start with the level 1 capital, but as you build up those capital spaces up to level 3, those heroes become more and more powerful with the options and the abilities that they get to do.
The dynamic that exists on the player board between the capital and how you level it up, and then the different structures that you can build within your capital that allow you to build different types of units is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And to me, it harkens also back to sort of like the RTS days.
Yeah.
You know, that element to me felt a lot like the original Warcraft games, honestly. It felt a lot like that.
Speaking of units, there's 2 base units in the game. There's peons, and then everyone has a basic warrior that they're allowed to use a little bit more hardy in attacks and whatnot. There's also sea units, and then there's air units, which allow the players to fly across the board and even carry soldiers with them to be able to traverse quicker. So how the game works is basically, it's really, really simple. Across the top of the player board, there's a set of actions that a player can take. During a round, starting with the first player, each player in turn order will take 1 action, and each player is allowed 2 actions per round.
Right.
But it's got some unique things here going on, because it allows you to use peons to kind of follow other players' actions and to take double actions on your combat kind of
Exactly.
side.
It's really cool. The actions are split into the capital actions and then the command actions.
Yeah.
So the capital actions on the left side of the board include recruit, build, research, and tax, and they do a variety of things. But those are the actions that can be followed.
Yeah.
So if I were to go on one of those actions on my turn, then it goes around the table to see who might want to follow that action. And then they can take a capital action of their choice, with a peon if they have one in their courtyard.
Yeah, it's really cool, too, though. If you've already taken one of those actions previously with an action token, you can't follow.
Right.
So basically, you're only allowed to take one action of
any type
per round. The same thing works on the command side, too.
Yeah, the command side's a little different. You can't follow, but you can muster your own ability there. So if you take one of the command actions, which is to march, and there's 2 spaces for march, so you can march twice, but they're 2 different spaces. There's sail, fly, and cast. There's spells to be cast in this game as well.
Yeah.
When you go to one of those spaces, you can also use one of your own peons to muster a command action. So you can use another command action on that same turn.
All right. So as we mentioned, there's basically 3 types of resources. Those resources are going to be used to do a variety of different things in the game. They're going to be used to recruit your heroes and your peons and your warriors. They're going to be used to build towers, to upgrade your buildings, and even to cast spells. During the game. But the most important thing is they're going to be used during combat.
Right.
Combat is the meat and potatoes of this game because you're going to be moving and exploring, and combat is inevitable. It's such a tight board, so anytime you move into a location with another player, it's going to initiate combat. What I like about the combat in this game is that each player has 7 tactics cards that are identical. In board game terms, it's called perfect information.
Yeah.
You know exactly what they have, how much power they have at that location, and the cards that they have in their hand. What you don't know is which card they're going to play, but there's a little bit of information you will know depending upon the amount of resources that they have.
Exactly.
Because each of these cards requires a specific amount of resources in order to cast or to utilize.
Yeah, so during battle, it kind of comes down to summing up your opponent, taking a look at their resources, thinking, okay, well, he can't play this, this, or this.
Right.
So now you've got it narrowed down to these 4 cards.
Right.
So oftentimes it can boil down to really figuring out the one card that they're likely to play.
Right.
But what makes it interesting is other times it can kind of boil down to one of maybe 2 or 3 cards that they might play. And that also depends on what you play, because a lot of the battle cards, they'll have their innate battle value that sort of increases the battle value on the board with your units.
Right.
But it also has some special abilities, like this card might negate another card.
Right.
Or this card might be a +2 against a certain card. So there's a lot of little interesting layers to the decision making there.
I love that aspect about the game, too, is because it forces players to commit to actions. If a player's going to spend their turn using their resources in order to recruit or to build, they're not going to have the same amount of resources in order to combat.
Right.
So players can take advantage of that in a 4X style of game by watching what other players are doing intently and then taking advantage of the actions that they do take.
Yeah, I also like the fact that even though this is a conflict game and the conflict occurs, I don't feel like it's as encouraged as the number one priority. There's a lot of other things, like many 4X games, but in this one in particular, it feels like, oh, I could trigger the win doing this, this, and this. It's really more, in my opinion, about using conflict to survive or to stop another player from advancing those other goals.
Yeah, in fact, the several games that we've played so far, combat hasn't been the
not the priority.
Not
for
the
sure.
priority for us, exactly. We have triggered the game end conditions by building our towers, which seem to be in the easier route of them, and it's because we haven't gone into heavy conflicts. We haven't stopped those people from expanding rapidly. It's a cool system. I really, really, really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think the balance between all the things going on works well, because like you said, someone could build their towers, and that seems like maybe the easier route, but if your opponent's paying attention, they can come over and even take a tower out.
Right.
You know? So it's all about keeping your progress going and keeping your opponent's progress in check. I mean, like a lot of these games, but it really plays well in this. These are really cool from a prototype component standpoint, all these very cool built sort of pieces, but the finished components are going to be even more spectacular.
Yeah, what we know so far is that all of the characters will be miniatures.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the towers and the capitals yet, but the miniatures we've seen so far look fantastic. Really, really cool. So, guys, that is Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea by Scott Alms. Make sure you guys back it on Kickstarter. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make comments below. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. And everything else here that we do at Man vs. Meeple. And we'll catch you guys next time.
Thanks.